Welcome to the P.A.S. Report podcast. If you're tired of censorship, outraged by government abuses, and thirsty for real insights, then you're in the right place. Get ready, because here, the fight for freedom never ends. Here's your host, Professor Nick Giordano.
What's up, everyone? Welcome to another episode of the P.A.S. Report podcast. I'm your host, Nick Giordano. I am glad you could join me today. If you're not already a subscriber, make sure to subscribe and follow the podcast so you never miss an episode. Also, don't forget to visit the PAS Report website, pasreport.com, and share this episode with your family and friends and on social media. Help inform other people about what's happening in the United States of America, because we are living through unprecedented times, and it's amazing. Right? I mean, I have to switch things up again, just like I did last week, because we are getting about 2 years worth of news cycles in a matter of weeks. It really is crazy, all the news that's breaking out there. And we're not talking about, unimportant stories that have little impact on our lives, on our nation. These are monumental stories, because today we have a topic to cover that could reshape the landscape of American politics as we know it. Now, I was originally going, usually Mondays are the interview episodes, and then Wednesdays are the straight monologue where I pick an issue and I discuss it. However, switching it up again this week, and I know last week I promised to talk about what is Project 2025, but again, I'm going to have to put that off again. I may release a bonus episode on it this week, so you may get 3 episodes this week. We'll see what happens if I fit it in. But we have to cover the president's announcement that he is officially ending his bid for re-election. The 2024 presidential election will no longer have Joe Biden as the Democrat nominee. And this is an unprecedented move that has sent shockwaves throughout the political spectrum. So in today's episode, I'm going to break it down for you. What does this mean for the Democrats? What does it mean for the 2024 elections? And what does it mean for the United States as a whole? For years, there has been whispers and speculations about President Biden's ability to continue to lead this nation. His cognitive decline has been a point of contention for quite some time, and people like me have been focusing on it ever since 2020. So it's not like his cognitive decline is a shock. Everyone knew it that was paying attention, but you had the media and the Democratic Party try to cover it up. It was a conspiracy, plain and simple. And they were no longer able to cover it up following the president's disastrous debate performance and everything that came after that. The campaign thought that if we put Joe Biden out there more, that's going to help. But the problem is when you have this cognitive decline, every day is going to be worse than the day before. And Joe Biden's problem wasn't that the American people weren't seeing him enough. The problem was that we were seeing him too much. And so it was obvious to see what was going on. But it was the debate performance. That's when everything changed. That's when the media, the Democrat Party, and government officials were exposed. And ever since then, there has been a growing pressure campaign to oust President Biden from the ticket. Now, with his decision to step aside, we have to ask very important, poignant questions. And we have to demand that this administration answers them immediately. We have to hold those that were engaged in the conspiracy and cover-up. We have to hold them responsible. But the most obvious question is that how is this going to affect not the 2024 presidential race? How does it affect the remainder of his presidency? I mean, think logically. Can he effectively govern the nation if he's deemed unfit to run for re-election? And this is an interesting moment in American history. We stand at a critical juncture. The announcement of President Biden's withdrawal from the 2024 race, it's not about one man's decision. Let's be honest. Don't pretend that Joe Biden came to this decision on his own after carefully consulting with his family. It wasn't his decision. He was forced out. There is no doubt about it. He was forced out by the party bosses. And now we have to talk about the implications for our republic. We have to talk about how it impacts our political institutions. We have to talk about the future direction of this country. There are so many different dimensions to this development, especially considering that we're talking about the party for the last 8 years that have been screaming about threats to democracy. Are you kidding me at this point? Monty Python couldn't even make this stuff up at this point. He really couldn't. What we are witnessing is historic. And don't forget, The Democrat National Convention is only in a few weeks. What is that going to look like in Chicago? Are we going to see a repeat of 1968, which Lyndon B. Johnson, it was after the first primary, New Hampshire, he lost, and he decided that it's better that he steps down and let the primary process continue. Went to the convention. There were fights in Chicago. Ultimately, Hubert Humphrey became the Democrat nominee, and it was a disaster for Democrats in that election. It's what led to Nixon winning the presidency. Are we about to witness the same thing? Are we about to witness the 1968 Chicago Convention in 2024? It's going to be remarkable. So everyone hang tight. I'm going to get to it all after this quick commercial break. Are you prepared for the unexpected? As a former emergency manager, being prepared is not a choice, it's a necessity, and that's where the Wellness Company comes in. Imagine having the peace of mind that you're equipped to handle any medical crisis, from tick bites to the latest pandemic. The Wellness Company's medical emergency kit is your lifeline, packed with essential medications like ivermectin, emergency antibiotics, antivirals, and more. This kit is your ultimate preparedness solution. The Wellness Company's team of renowned medical professionals, including Dr. Peter McCullough, Dr. James Thorpe, Dr. Harvey Risch, Dr. Drew Pinsky, and more. They are truth-seeking doctors, and they have designed a kit that sets the gold standard for safety and prevention. Don't wait for the next crisis to strike. Visit twc.health/PAS and use promo code PAS for an exclusive 10% discount just for being a listener of this show. Prepare today, rest easy tomorrow. Use code PAS at checkout. Welcome back, everyone. Now, as we jump in, we first have to consider immediate ramifications. President Biden's cognitive health has been under scrutiny for years. His public appearances are often marked by gaffes and missteps, moments of confusion, and it's gotten far worse today than it was 4 years ago. Critics like myself have argued that he has clear signs of declining mental acuity, that he is not capable or fit to be the president of the United States. Many others agree with that. Supporters, however, dismiss these claims, right? You had the media, the Democrat Party brokers, that we exaggerated what was going on with President Biden, that it was politically motivated attacks. Don't believe what you hear and see from the president because it's cheap fakes, as Karine Jean-Pierre told us. But now it's evident. It's evident to most normal people who aren't ideological zealots that this president is not fit to run for another campaign. He's not fit for another term in office. And so if he can't mount a re-election campaign, how can he govern effectively for the remainder of his term? How? The role of the president is demanding. It requires that you have sharp mental faculties, that you could quickly make decisions, that you have a steady hand because of the complexities of both domestic and international affairs. With Biden stepping down from the race, he cannot fulfill these duties effectively anymore. And again, I will raise this question that I've raised before. Who is really running this country? Who is making decisions? The American people have a right to know. Is it Vice President Kamala Harris, especially that we need to know that if she's going to be the Democrat nominee going forward? Is it some government bureaucrat, unelected bureaucrat officials? Is it former President Obama that's really running? Who is running this country? Every American should be demanding an answer to that. And it raises other questions as well. It highlights the inner workings of the Democratic Party, which you don't want to cross because you see how they treat their own, right? Most in the media and Democrat circles said that this was the best Biden ever, that he was sharp, he was focused behind the scenes. Yeah, you may see all the public gaffes that he makes and the missteps and looks of confusion, but you don't see him behind the scenes. Behind the scenes, he's sharp as a whip. That's what they were telling us for the last 4 years. And this isn't like they were telling us this 4 years ago. They were saying this just 2 or 3 months ago, right before the debate they were saying this. And then it all came crashing down. Now they're telling us that, well, it was the president and the president's decision alone to make. Do you really believe that nonsense? Are you that naive? I said it weeks ago that if the party bosses want him off this ticket, they will force him to drop out of this race. And that's exactly what happened. These people are jackals, understand that. And behind the scenes, the party bosses engage in a maximum effort campaign to force him and drop him from the ticket. It was very evident when we saw what was taking place towards the end of last week. And it's remarkable because last week we had the Republican National Convention. You would think that I would actually spend an episode on that. But because of the way the news cycles are breaking, it's almost impossible. Now, the Republican National Convention was actually one of the most successful conventions that I have ever witnessed in my lifetime. And I've been watching these things for the past 2 decades, a little bit longer than that. I've never seen the Republican convention that was that energized, that was that enthusiastic, that was that unified. And it was the most successful convention that I've witnessed in quite some time. I can't recall off the top of my head another convention that was as successful as that one. Now, when President Trump, following an assassination attempt, comes out to speak on Thursday night, it was a remarkable moment in American history. And it was a remarkable moment for the Republican Party. It energized the Republicans. His speech went on a little bit too long, about 45 minutes longer than it should have. But ultimately, with the convention being a success, it instilled panic within Democrat circles. You started to see Adam Schiff come out and question whether or not Biden should remain on the ticket. In fact, he called for Biden to step down. And understand, he's nothing more than Nancy Pelosi's puppet. He doesn't say anything without running it by the former speaker. So for him to come say that, everyone knew that Nancy Pelosi was trying really hard behind the scenes to oust President Biden. There were reports that the President of the United States, President Biden, and the former Speaker of the House, Nancy Pelosi, got into a heated argument where the Speaker basically told the President to go F himself. She didn't want to talk to him. She said, put your Chief of Staff on the phone. Then you had Schumer coming out and questioning whether or not Biden should be on the ticket, saying that he probably should step down. And it snowballed. Then Seth Moulton published an opinion editorial. And the opinion editorial was really remarkable because he explains how in one event a few months ago that the president didn't even recognize him. Now, Moulton explains that Biden was once a mentor to him, that they were really good friends, and that when he saw President Biden on a D-Day occasion, that Biden seemed to be aloof and clueless. Now, where was he then? Why didn't he speak out then? He said in his op-ed that it was the debate that solidified that he wasn't cognitively there anymore. But it just goes to show you, if this never was exposed in that debate, the Democrats would have essentially ran a vegetable. They didn't care. But because it got exposed, they had to take him out. And by Friday, a growing number of House members and senators were signing on to the idea of throwing the president overboard. They forced him from the ticket. It was nothing short of a bloodless coup that we saw take place. And now the power brokers in the Democrat Party, they're going to handpick a new candidate. A process that is bound to be fraught with intense debate. You're going to see power struggles. There's going to be strategic calculations that are going to be made. And who are they going to choose? That's the next question, right? Who are they going to choose? Is it going to be Vice President Kamala Harris? Will it be someone else, a rising star within the political party, a Gavin Newsom or a Gretchen Whitmer? Or are they going to go with Hillary Clinton, something that I said would happen over a year ago? So the selection process is really going to be interesting, and the Democrats are certainly going to want to avoid an all-out internal civil war within their own party. Now, I believe that some of the Democrats whose names may be bantered about, like Gavin Newsom, he's been relatively quiet, right? He's staying out of the fray, and it's because he doesn't want to be the sacrificial lamb for 2024. He sees what's going on. But it's more to it. The situation puts the Democratic Party strategy under a microscope. For years, they've campaigned on a narrative of protecting democracy. They frame their political opponents as the biggest threat to democracy. As President Biden once said, the biggest threat to democracy since the founding of our republic. Well, now, with their own candidate stepping down, especially under these circumstances, how can they push this narrative again? How could they push it? I mean, the narrative was always a joke. It was always BS, and I told you that. I routinely explained how their whole threats to democracy campaign was nonsense, that the bureaucracy has and will always be the biggest threat to democracy. But doesn't forcing Joe Biden off the ticket illustrate how they could care less about this idea of democracy? Again, think about this logically. In 2020, they forced Biden's opponents off the ticket. Right? They forced Pete Buttigieg, Bernie Sanders. They forced Democrats to basically end their primary early and coalesce around Joe Biden. Then as candidate Joe Biden, they hid him in a basement throughout the 2020 campaign. Once he became president, they engaged in a conspiracy to cover up the president's obvious cognitive decline. And then in the 2024 primary process, they prevented any real challenges to him. Any real challenges. They switched states, so it was no longer going to be Iowa. That would be the first caucus. Instead, that wouldn't count. It's not going to be New Hampshire being the first primary. Now we're going to start it off in South Carolina because Democrat Party bosses didn't want any real challenges. They prevented any real challengers like Bobby Kennedy Jr. to the ticket. Instead, they allowed Marianne Williamson, which everyone knew she had no chance, and then another no-name Democrat, Dean Phillips, who seems like a good guy. I'm not bashing him by saying he was a no-name Democrat. He was the only one that tried to actually challenge the sitting president, but he was ostracized. He was blackballed from Democrat circles because of his challenge. So they prevented any real challenges to him in the Democrat primary. And then he wins. And these frauds have the nerve to claim that they care about democracy? I mean, that's laughable. Democrat voters never really had a choice. If Democrat voters didn't have their heads buried in the sand, if they were aware of the president's cognitive decline, I could guarantee you they would have voted for a different candidate. But they didn't, and they still won't. And it's not to absolve Democrat voters themselves. Because, again, it was clear what was going on with the current president of the United States. So it doesn't absolve them. They should have been aware what was going on with the president. Now, the party bosses will be the ones that will decide who the new candidate is. Obviously, Kamala Harris is the favorite. She's the vice president. And in Biden's announcement that he's not running again, he endorsed her. But there are a lot of people who are uneasy about her running. And listen, if she was competent, she would have already been president. She would have been replaced Biden 2 years ago. So there's obvious concerns with the idea of President Kamala Harris. There's a reason that she's not president today. And how are they going to justify the replacement process to the American public, particularly Democrat voters, to select a new candidate? Think about it. And this is breaking news, so the details haven't been flushed about yet. But there is talk about the delegates determining the nominee at the Democratic National Convention in a few weeks. Again, it shows how Democrats have no regard for their own voters. Their own voters won't have a say. It's just the party elite that has the say. And the fighting we are witnessing in Democrat circles is glorious. It's glorious to me. And the reason it's glorious, I don't say that to be mean. The reason it's glorious is because it's all self-inflicted. It's nice to see for once Republicans are united and the Democrats are the party of chaos. It's a nice change of pace for me. And they have no one to blame but themselves. No one to blame. They box themselves into a corner. Are they really going to go with Vice President Harris, where polls show that she is more unpopular than President Biden? Are they going to leapfrog her? And what does that mean for the women and black voters? Now, that shouldn't even matter. But how can the party of DEI really replace her with a white man or even a white woman for that matter? And it would be a disaster. But right now, polls are showing that Kamala Harris is trailing former President Trump in the swing states by 7 to 10 points. That's worse than how Biden is performing with his cognitive decline in those states. Or will it be like I said? Will they swap out Kamala Harris for Hillary Clinton? And make no mistake about it, she is licking her chops at jumping in. Even though she released a statement saying that she's endorsing Kamala, I don't buy it for a second. Understand, Hillary is one of the most calculated politicians in the history of the United States. Anything that she puts out there for a reason. And I have little doubt that she wants the presidency, but she also wants to appear above the fray. She knows that if she bulldozes Kamala Harris, it's only going to hurt her and her reputation, and it divides the Democratic Party further. She would want it to look like she was being magnanimous, that it was the party bosses that came to her to say, save our party from implosion, that she's above the fray. So I think Hillary Clinton is someone to pay attention to. And listen, they may go with Kamala Harris, and I warned that if they decide to go with Kamala Harris, I think that the Democrats are silently conceding the 2024 race. They don't want to burn the party down, so they're going to use Kamala as the sacrificial lamb. They don't really like her. They don't want her to be president, and they'll look towards reevaluating 2028. But, you know, you have a lot of problems with the Democrats right now. You have the progressive wing of the party. They're already criticizing the attempts to oust Biden from the ticket. You have people like Congresswoman Alexandria Ocasio-Cortez and others who were publicly criticizing their party bosses for not sticking with Joe. Where are they going to stand in all this? Who are they going to back in the nomination selection? What about the Obamas, right? I mean, a lot of people think President Obama pulls the strings behind the scenes, and he released a statement pretty much throwing Kamala Harris under the bus. He didn't endorse her. He stated that the selection process should be decided at the convention. So it's an evolving situation. I can't tell you how this is all going to move forward. We're going to hear talk about it in the upcoming days and weeks. But if the Democratic leadership bypasses Harris, it's going to ignite a significant backlash, especially from the progressive wing of the party. And this division within the party is going to weaken their overall position, period. It's going to make it more challenging to present a united front against the Republicans, who are very united right now. Either way, it is difficult to imagine, short of maybe Michelle Obama, how the Democrats could sustain party unity. I just don't see it. And if Democrats fail to manage this transition smoothly, it's going to be a disaster for them. It's going to be a problem that leads to lasting fractures within their political party. They are only 3 weeks outside of their convention. And the one thing that's guaranteed is that there will be a hell of a lot of people tuning into the Democratic National Convention. I'm interested, right? I mean, are we going to see the replay of 1968? Right now, you look at the mood of Democrats and the convention, it's going to be disjointed. There's going to be anger, distrust, a sense of hopelessness. The atmosphere is going to be more like a funeral or the summer of love than it is a united front. Understand that if this goes to the party convention, well, then all the delegates have to get together. A few names will be announced that those will be the candidates. And then you have to see the political jockeying. Delegates are going to be fighting amongst each other. There's going to be several rounds of voting. It's going to be bad. And then what about President Biden? What role is he really going to play in this? That's going to be interesting to watch too, right? Because there's reports out there that the convention is going to be a tribute to Biden's leadership. His 50 years of dedicated public service to the United States. They want to try and preserve his legacy and prevent further embarrassment. But haven't they already destroyed his legacy? Haven't they already embarrassed him by making their coup attempt so public? I said it at the outset of the episode that the Democrat Party bosses, they're like jackals. I brought this up when Emperor Cuomo was ousted from power. Politicians, you never have to worry about your political opponents ousting you. It never comes from your political opponents. All the talk about Republicans impeaching and removing Biden from office was always a joke. It was a waste of time. When politicians fall, it usually comes from within. It comes from those closest to you. And that's exactly what happened here. The Pelosi's, the Schumers, the South Meltons, they were the ones that plunged a dagger into the back of Joe Biden. Et tu, Brute. That's the way it always was, always has been, and always be. It's all about power. That's what Democrats care about. I never want to hear the Democrats or the media enablers ever to talk about threats to democracy. They've proven themselves to be frauds. They care about their power, their political power. And it's clear from what we just witnessed that there's nothing they wouldn't do to try and maintain that power as best they could. But they've also put America and Americans in a dangerous position. And I'm going to explain that when we get back from this quick break. So hang tight and we'll be right back. Welcome back, everyone. So I focused enough on internal Democrat Party and the fights and what's going on with them. Now let's turn our attention to the broader implications for America, particularly on the world stage, because we are living during dangerous times. I mean, the United States has lost a significant amount of power and influence over the last few years. We've seen adversaries rise and gain more power and influence. So this poses a threat to our national security and our global standing. And the whole situation, it just adds to that decline of America. We no longer have the moral superiority when it comes to preaching to other nations. I mean, the decision to pull Biden from the ticket exposes the Democrats' hypocrisy on a global scale. Does it not? For years, Democrats, the media, government bureaucrats, they engaged in a relentless lawfare campaign, weaponizing all aspects of government to target their political opponents, particularly Donald Trump. And the unprecedented investigations and legal battles, it was an attempt to destroy their political opposition, both while Trump was president and his post-presidency. And the lawfare campaign has eroded trust in our political system. There's little doubt about it. But this isn't just about Trump. It's about the weaponization of the processes to achieve political ends. With Biden being forced out, the same undemocratic tactics are now being turned inward against their own leadership. And this internal cannibalism only further delegitimizes our institutions, makes us a mockery on the world stage. How can the United States continue to preach about the sanctity of democratic principles when we witness such blatant manipulation and backroom dealings in our process. Our adversaries are laughing. They see America as a nation in disarray. They see a political class more concerned with retaining power than upholding democratic principles. And the political class is doing exactly what they do in authoritarian countries. So it's led to an erosion of credibility. And unfortunately, we can no longer lecture other nations because we are becoming that banana republic. You know, George Hill and I discussed last week how our adversaries see the president's obvious cognitive decline, and they're going to take advantage of that. And if you didn't listen to that episode, I suggest you do. Now, George reached out to me yesterday, and he has little doubt that this only hastens their timelines. He worries that our intelligence collection posture may not be up to par of what our adversaries are seeking to do, because if it's anything like Secret Service and the DEI blitz that we've witnessed over the last several years, well, our intelligence posture is going to be non-existent because it's run by a bunch of incompetent morons. Countries like China, Russia, Iran, they closely monitor what's going on in the political world of the United States. Understand that our foreign adversaries pay more attention to American politics than most Americans do. And they see the upheaval. They see an opportunity to advance their agendas and challenge our dominance in the world stage. And the Biden administration was already perceived as weak and ineffective. That's not a secret. They didn't fear or respect this president. Even our allies didn't fear or respect him. They may have liked him over the former president, but they didn't fear or respect him. And this development only compounds that perception. Consider China, a nation that certainly has growing political ambitions, global ambitions, a strategic vision for the 21st century. No one can dispute that. We've been witnessing this for the last 2 decades, picking up steam over the last few years. But they've long viewed the Biden administration as lacking the resolve and coherence necessary to counter their rise. And with the political chaos, China may now feel emboldened to accelerate its plans in the South China Sea, Taiwan, against the Philippines. Who knows? They might calculate that the United States is so distracted and divided that we would be unable to mount a serious response. And they're actually right about that. And so this is their greatest opportunity in their 100-year march, that this is their only opportunity to take advantage and seek their global dominance that they wanted and that they want by 2049. What about Russia and Vladimir Putin? I mean, Putin consistently sought to exploit divisions within the Western world. That's not a secret. And the instability in Washington is a propaganda goldmine for the Kremlin. They can point to our dysfunction as evidence of the superiority of their own system and use it to justify their actions in Ukraine and elsewhere. I mean, think about how much power Russia has today than prior to the Biden administration coming into power in 2021. Think about it logically. I mean, despite all the sanctions, they're exporting more oil and natural gas than ever before. They're making tons of money on their oil and natural gas exports. And they're selling it to allies of ours, right? So a country like Japan, really good ally to the United States, is buying Russian oil and natural gas. You have countries like India buying oil and natural gas from Russia. You have countries like Saudi Arabia that's working with Russia. I mean, you look at all these countries that are supposed to be quote-unquote allies of ours, and yet they're all working with Vladimir Putin. So it really tells you a lot about what's going on. Then you have Iran, right? Iran's watching with interest. There's little doubt about that. The regime doesn't fear this administration. They haven't faced any pressure from this administration. In fact, it's been the exact opposite. Iran is wealthier today than they were in 2021. Iran is stronger and more powerful today than they were in 2021. And Iran is much closer to a nuclear bomb than they were in 2021. They've wreaked havoc throughout the Middle East, and now I suspect that they're going to up the ante. They're going to grow more emboldened. They know a weakened and distracted America gives them breathing room to pursue their ambitions, extend their influence throughout the Middle East. And I have little doubt that Tehran is now going to exploit the regional instability in a way that we haven't seen yet. This entire debacle is going to accelerate the timeline for our adversaries to challenge our dominance, and the perception of American weakness is going to invite these tests, the provocations. They believe that the United States is now a paper tiger, and it's time to push the boundaries. And they may do it through cyber attacks, the funding of the proxy groups in Iran's case throughout the Middle East, military incursions like we're seeing in Ukraine. And you're going to see the growing alliance of anti-U.S. countries. You're going to continue to see that strategic alliance, the BRIC alliance, build. The Biden administration's incompetence and the chaos surrounding what the Democrats have created, unfortunately, it undermines American power and puts us all at risk. So the decision to remove President Biden from the 2024 race is a pivotal moment in American history. It does have real consequences, and the next few weeks are going to be remarkable, and that's putting it mildly. That's why you have to keep it right here. Tune into the P.A.S. Report podcast, and you have to subscribe to this podcast. Share it with others so that you don't miss a beat. So thank you for joining me. Keep it right here at the P.A.S. Report, because I will be putting out more episodes that really explore what's going on in this historical moment within America.
Thank you for listening to the P.A.S. Report. Don't forget to rate, share, and hit that subscribe button. That way you'll never miss an episode. For more exclusive content and updates, visit us at PASreport.com and follow Professor Giordano on all social media platforms at P.A.S. Report.